Well, hello, and welcome to another Instagram Live at Wilson Daniels. I'm William Davis, I'm the Director of Education for Wilson Daniels, and we are going to be joined by Nicole Rolet of Chêne Bleu on the Southern Rhone here in just a moment, where we're going to be talking about the 2020 vintage and specifically their Rosé program and the ageability of Rosé, especially on this really incredible and special property that Chêne Bleu is located on. So we're going to have her join us in just a moment. But for those of you that happen to have any questions, certainly put those in the chat and we'll get those to Nicole here in just a moment. So let's see if she is about to hop on here. And when she does, there we go. Right. Loud and clear. So from the other side of the pond, there comes Nicole.
Oh,
hello.
Wow. That's a first for me, William. I actually got on. That's very exciting.
Well, I'm glad that we were the first. So it's first time for everything, and after this, it's like riding a bike. It's an absolute breeze. So thanks again for joining us. I know that it's what, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening now. So, probably the right time for a glass or two of rosé anyway.
It's a beautiful time of day out here, especially because the weather has been just perfect. And this is always my favorite time of year. Late May, early June, definitely the right time to visit as well.
So, with that in mind, for those that are watching and listening, you want to give everybody just a quick overview of what it's like to be at Chêne Bleu at Verrier.
Well, I think the thing that's so special about this place is that we're so high up in the mountains. That, of course, has a huge bearing on the kind of wines we make, but also where we are and even in terms of visiting. And I thought maybe I could try to take you outside for a second to give you an idea of where we're situated, because you'll see how it impacts the style of what we make. Do you want to let me try that?
Sure. Yeah. Let's get our proverbial and creative juices flowing by walking out to the view. So
yeah, I came into our dining room here because the Wi-Fi is safer, but I do think it's such a beautiful day and such a beautiful hour that if I can show you where we are and you can still hear me. Do you recognize the big mountain that's all the way over there?
So I see Ventoux.
Absolutely, we're up here.
Yeah, it looks like you.
Of the Mont Ventoux.
Yeah, it looks like we got a touch of buffering there, but it takes me back because for those of you that are on the call, we were here back in 2019. We spent a little bit of time at the property, and there with the veranda directly below, you see the cypress trees. I am with you. I do miss that view.
So that's actually the edge.
It's such a special place.
Behind me. And you see that's where the bottom of Europe has smashed into the top of Africa and put the plate on its side. So our vines are actually growing into that. And then it's a really old property. You can see here the stained glass windows. It's from the 9th century. And people have been making wine on and off here for centuries, monks and Templar monks. It's been a very agricultural place forever. And that's fun for us because it allows us to do things with this completely different timeline psychologically. I mean, just to give you an idea, the fact that we have these walls that are so thick and that have resisted the test of time, and we're able to enjoy this place because of that, I want to make sure that we as a family, as a team, do things that 1,000 years from now, people are going to look back and think, oh, wow, thank you for having, really done things right and set things up in a proper way to still be relevant and still be helpful to us. So it has impacted our work from the beginning. And it's one of the reasons why even when we started making rosé about whatever, 20, well, we started experimenting about 20 years ago. We made our first rosé in our own tanks in 2006. From the get-go, we were thinking, how do we make a rosé that's built to last? How do we do something that's special and different? We don't want to just do some cheap and cheery leftover, to use up some extra juice that we had. And so it impacts everything you do and how you think.
Yeah, it's funny how you look, and to me I think the greatest producers of rosé, they look at it as a fine wine. They don't look at it as, either leftovers or something that is only going to make their red wines, more powerful or greater longevity or any of those other things. They look at, rosé as something that in many ways it is the foundation of quality for the estate.
Absolutely, not just quality, but also it's, we hope, something that distinguishes us, because when you're small and new and in a very isolated place like we are up here at the top of our mountain, I think you're very cognizant also of marching to a different drummer, right? Your weather's going to be different. Your soils are different. It's going to make you think harder about what you plant and when you harvest, all of those things. And so it really emphasizes the think outside the box dimension to the winemaking. And that's very helpful, because when you are working in France, in a region that has all those amazing traditions and all that know-how and all those people who have been doing the same thing beautifully for 300 years, it's very different than if you're setting up shop in the new world or a place where it hasn't been done before. And so you're not going to really think about trying to do things exactly like them. You want to learn to paint by numbers and respect all those traditions, but also bring your own take and your own approach to solving for this. I mean, just to give you an idea of the soils, the seabed that is several kilometers below ground where we are is pushed up because of that edge of the plate. And when we go around our vineyard in the mountains, we actually find these crazy, can you see that snail shell? That's the size of a paper plate, right? We
That's a
have
big snail.
the sea in
Yes.
our backyard, way up at 1,800 feet, right? And so, needless to say, from the get-go, we wanted to look at using that mineral finish that we think is the signature across all our wines of these very unusual ancient soils that we have, and the mixture of them that gives that mineral seasoning, which is very exciting for a winemaker to have something in the vineyard that leaves its mark and that gives the fruit something above and beyond just the expression of the grape itself. Of course, it means you have to work your soils in a very specific way, because lends you naturally down a path of organic, sustainable, biodynamic, and that biodiversity and the microbiome, bees that we use, as you know, in our sustainability program. All those things are going to be coming together to keep the wild, natural, and a bit exotic expression of this terroir, right? We're completely surrounded by forests. We have 450 acres of forest around the vineyard, and it's teeming with life, teeming with animals, no neighbors putting all those pesticides. So right away, your canvas is very different than 10 minutes away in the valley.
It's funny that you talk about the ideas of, organics and sustainability, because I believe that Claude and Lydia Bourguignon were at the estate, yesterday? You were
There
just
you are,
having dinner,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. If I wish I had known, I could get them to give everyone a little salute, because they are a bit like the snow leopards, because they're so solicited around the world by all the soil geeks who want them to come and check in on their soils. So we work closely with them, and then they give us all the micro organism profiles and the microbiome studies, and then we work with the University of Avignon and the scientists from the Mont Ventoux biosphere that this is part of, to give us the macroorganisms, and we have this lovely information exchange. So it's always a treat when they come to visit.
You know, with 1,200 years, really of history on, on the estate, on the property, we talk about the 2020 vintage, fast forwarding to the latest vintage, and probably one that's going to go down in the history for a myriad of reasons, right? So, we talked about this, again, from a cultural and, kind of a climactic perspective. What were some of the things that you noticed about 2020 that made it unique in a very good way compared to vintages like 19 or 16 or, any of the others that you've faced now over the past 15 years? Because we're really looking at 15 years starting with the '06.
Oy vey. That's all I can say. I'm from New York, okay? You can take the girl out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the girl. So the first thing is that we had very extreme weather, right? So up here at this in this property, we're all extremophiles, right? We love extreme things. We love pushing boundaries. We love breaking glass ceilings, all of that stuff, being out there on the edge, literally and figuratively, in terms of the work we do. But really, there were so many lovely things this year that happened because it was a dry season. At some points we didn't have the same disease pressure that we've had other times, so that means the copper sulfate, which we use almost none of because it's organic, this year was very, very no pressure at all. So there were some silver linings on all of this, but we had an extreme storm, which was very difficult. They whacked a lot of the greenery off of the plants, especially in a couple of the parcelles. So we lost a lot of our Syrah, a lot of our roll with the Vermentino, which is essential to our Rosé usually, and that was not fun at all. We don't usually have much frost up here. This is one of the strange dualities of being high up, is that although your average temperatures are lower than in the valley, and although you harvest in October instead of September until you have big variations between day and night, which you don't have in the valley, this cold air, when it hits like that, tends to sink to the valley, and so you tend to be more protected from that than other people. However, we did have a bit. We had a lot of we had hail. We had a lot of dryness, drought right before harvest. So just when the world was going through all those extreme shocks in terms of commercial things and economic things, and the way that translated in wineries, as you know, was very challenging in terms of having the right people available in the vineyard, reorganizing your work, all of that. We also had some extreme conditions. Now, the good news is that it really put to the test our way of dealing with the land in a sustainable way. For example, having cover crops between the rows. When you have a massive storm, it broke off some of the canes and it did damage from the yields, but it didn't do that soil erosion that it did elsewhere, because we have that fantastic root system from all the cover crops. And over, the fact that we were working in a natural way meant that we were much more protected than other winemakers in a difficult year. So it was really put to the test, and it really came through with flying colors. Phew. So watch this space. You'll just be seeing more and more of that. And I hope that our neighbors will all be learning as well, 2020, why it's so helpful to manage a vineyard in a sustainable way.
Now, I know that I'm jumping a little ahead, but only because of the frost and the extreme damage that was done this year. How did that affect you? How did it affect the estate?
We have to say that, again, being high up here, we were spared. It's been tragic for so many, even in this region, because you may know that this Ventoux region, which is so up and coming, it's such a fantastic area to be involved with, as it's really sort of bursting through to people's consciousness as being one of the most exciting regions, emerging regions, not just in France, but in the world. And a lot of that is because of the altitude. The average temperatures here are cooler across the Ventoux than they would be elsewhere in the Rhone. So that's all helpful. But unfortunately, if you're down in the valley and that cold weather sets in, I think they had a lot of damage. So we were lucky on that one, and we didn't lose anything to write home of.
Yeah, we happened to be on with Victor Coulon of Beaurenard last month, right in the middle of the cold snap, and just seeing some of the flowering and some of the issues that they had in Châteauneuf as well as up in Rasteau. So
I love the Coulons. I love their family. I love their wines, and definitely, Beaurenard, like just all our friends. In this case, we just felt really bad about that. But we have our fair share of weather risk up here, so it's not.
That's true. You are.
It's not like
you talked about extremes. It's certainly there.
Absolutely, and the vines that survive in these conditions are in really extreme circumstances, and that allows them to be extremely resilient, because our Grenache, for example, which is old vine Grenache, and that brings us back to these rosés, because not many people make rosé out of old vines. These root systems going down so many kilometers, so many meters below ground is really helpful in a difficult year like this. The old Grenache has these power drills that go to the subterranean water tables, so makes them more resistant to drought, and all those small things add up, which is a help to us.
Well, with that in mind, you've got the two bottles side by side, and I know that we want to have everybody, take a look at those, because, you do have extremes, and there's something to be said for vintage variation when it comes to rosé. So what do we have? So on your left.
So if you see the one that I'm tapping right now, this is the 2019, and here we have the 2020. And what I'm going to try to do, I just thought I'd show them side by side this year, because it's such a classic textbook case of vintage variation. And I think if you can see even the color there, that's even before we get them in the glass. Hopefully you can see the very salmony pale hue of the 19, and then you can see that much more red berries, much pinker version of the 2020. So right there you can expect a difference in style. Now we're lucky that these are two good vintages back to back. So it's really apples and oranges in terms of quality, which was lucky. And the difference between the wines is in many areas, but I put them in two glasses here as well, so maybe you can see them this way too.
Certainly can.
Yeah, so if you just look at the sticky texture, which is one of the signatures of our wine, they both, I don't know if you can see those residues on the legs where you are, but those, that is such a characteristic of our rosés every year, is to have that mouthfeel, that velvety voluptuousness that comes from the old vine Grenache, but really nice texture that, some years it's a bit more chiffony, some years it's a bit more velvety, but it always has a certain matter, certain chewiness that you don't associate with rosé. And
True.
And there are various reasons for that, but we believe a lot of it is coming from the fact that the base being every year Grenache, even though the amounts will change from, let's say, 65% to, up to this year, which, can be like 79% or something, like almost 80% Grenache, which we've never done before. And then the 19, which was only 60% Grenache. So right there, you're going to explain a lot of the difference in the color. Same thing is true with the Syrah, which on a typical year is going to be a nice 15%. Last year, just 8%. The Rolle, the Mourvèdre and the Cinsault, pretty stable, but the big difference is coming from that Vermentino, which in 2019 was our go-to in a hot year to have brightness and freshness that gave some lovely perfume in terms of the organoleptics, because one of the things that the Vermentino does is it allows you to not have to use tartric acid, right? Remember that we're trying to not use any chemicals in the vineyard or in the winery. Now for rosé, that's a real challenge, because you know that rosé has become like Photoshop for wine, right? There's like 60 different products you can use to strip the color, add the color, you know, bring down the acidity, add the acidity, all that stuff. And by the end, it's so tempting to tweak it to adjust for some kind of vintage variation, whatever, by using these little magic powders that we all have now. And we try to stay away from that and use the grape itself, in this case the Vermentino, to adjust from one vintage to the other. Now in 2020 it was very different, because one of the problems with that storm was that it really damaged our Vermentino. We had a lot less of it. And the other thing that was important is that it was a great year for nature. I'm sure you've heard that from a lot of your winemakers around the world. It was very expressive, very, very perfumey, beautiful, delicate aromas. And the red berries were really singing, whereas normally we use the Vermentino to add a little bit more on the nose of that perfumey style. So we didn't really need it as much, which was fortunate. So that's a huge difference just on the blend alone.
Well, when we talk about, you know, the ageability of rosé, and for anyone that has ever tasted these wines, I've always said that the Chêne Bleu rosé doesn't really start to show its potential until the fall. And usually that's at a time when, you know, most people are doing whatever they can to, you know, get rid of the whatever final stock they have of their rosé vintage, you know. And I'm like, no, wait, you need to be patient with the Chêne Bleu rosés, because, you know, they're not a summer rosé. They're actually more of a fall and winter, and then going into the next vintage. So to have the 19s here side by side with the 20s, for anyone that's got those wines still out there in their markets, you should really take the time to taste them, to experience them, to fall in love with them all over again, you know, because they evolve in the right way.
I thank you for saying that, because they are built to last, right? You know our secret weapons, right? We always like to put at least 20%, although in the last couple of years it's been coming up to about 25%, might even go to 30, in barrel for 3 months. And that really helps, of course, to give it that structure, give it the texture, and give it the backbone to age, and some of the complexity that it usually gets reviewed as having lots of, which is music to my ears, because complexity and ageability are, if I had 2 little dogs, I'd probably call them that, you know, because I love this too. And it has to have, you know, they always have to come in every wine that I enjoy, which is of course a matter of debate, right? There are a lot of people out there who like to keep it simple, stupid, and they only want freshness and they want it here and now. And that's great. That's what we love about the wine world, is that there's room for everyone. But personally, if I can't tick those 2 boxes on a rosé, on a wine of any kind, I feel like I've left something there. And on this one, if you try the 19, which is I have here, you know, the organoleptic profile is totally on citrus. It's going to have lovely grapefruit. It's going to have some hints of the red fruit, a little bit of cranberry. You know, you can have find some watermelon in there. But, you know, in general, it was a much more of a white fruit and citrus wine. Whereas this one has beautiful, beautiful red fruits coming through first for me. I mean, not just what you'd expect with the Grenache and Syrah, with the strawberries and raspberries, but also a little bit of that really pretty, like the cranberry. And I just love the way the nose is on the slightly more red fruit side this year, without being at all a heavy red fruit rosé, like of which there are many. So I don't think that if you like our usual rosé, you'll be surprised or disappointed in one way. But we notice a very big difference. Again, very lucky that with two good vintages back to back, there's not a big difference in quality. We are short on quantity. We were a bit short last year as well. So it's 2 years in a row where kind of scramble to get as much to everybody as they're hoping for, which is never good. We never like to put any of our partners in that position. But of course, Wilson Daniels, we always look out for you guys because you look out for us. So you should be from that point of view. I love drinking the last year rosé until about July. That's when I typically start switching over. The barrel has integrated more. It's kind of knitted together. And then when we talk about that, the fining, that we try to do this sort of very gentle, non-invasive fining thing. But if you look at it, we love the precision, we love the clarity on the appearance, on the nose, on the palate, and that's one of the side effects of using ground organic green pea powder, which, as you know, we use instead of the PVPP, which is a form of microplastic. And you can debate till the cows come home whether in that small quantity it's good or bad for you. But I like to think we all have enough microplastic in our lives as is, and all the fish we eat, and all that other stuff. So by using that, of course, it's great because it makes it organic and vegan and all the good stuff. But it also has the advantage that it helps with that precision and clarity on the phenolics. So yep, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, in terms of food pairing, we know these are food wines, right? As soon as we see that sticky texture, we always think about food. And that's why you were saying it's kind of rosé for all seasons, because you can drink it year round with food. Indoors, you don't have to have it just by the beach or on your terrace or by the pool. And it's much more practical that way. But with food, I always say, don't be afraid to try dressing this up. Okay, of course you take the summer salads, of course you go with the barbecue, of course you go with some of those nice tapas and charcuterie and all of that, like you would for a number of the well-made Provence rosés. But why don't you try it, all the way up with the really complex, sophisticated flavors, or try it with lobster or with dishes that are sort of noble foods that deserve respect and deserve for you to be pairing things with things that have complexity, flavor, texture, ageability, and a nice balance of flavors that are complementary to the food and not just going to be overpowered as soon as you have something with a bit of personality.
No, I completely agree. One of my favorite pairings I've ever had with the Chêne Bleu Rosé. I think this is back with the 16 Rosé, and it was it was late 16th, right after Thanksgiving. I was able to get a hold of some quail. So it was, some roasted quail, some squash, and it worked extremely well because it had the body to stand up to the squash. It's, the 16th I had, it was, really nice and bright, crunchy acidity that worked with the quail as well. So it was a simple roast, and then finished it off with a slight grill. I mean, the weather was actually pretty good that year. So it's, again, to echo your point, it's one of those wines that will go with a variety of cuisines.
Well, being the daughter of a food critic and a wine collector, I thought I had explored pretty much every food and wine pairing combination since the youngest age. And now I've realized I have to add quail and rosé to my bucket list. So thank you, William.
Anytime. So, with that in mind, I think that we're now approaching this. You talked about a 2.0, now we're in this second phase of, I think, rosé consumption, and how consumers and the trade are looking at rosé. Where do you see the category going, and where does Chêne Bleu fit into it?
Well, it's funny you should speak about Rosé 2.0, because we're dealing with Chêne Bleu 2.0, with the fact that Danny has arrived at the vineyard a few years ago and has taken such an interest. Xavier's daughter, who has now become production liaison as well as the commercial manager. We're thinking about that. We have Jean-Louis and Benedict, who have done such an amazing job for us in the vineyard and the winery. My husband's sister and her husband. We've been a very tight-knit family, and then so we are thinking about where we go from here, and it all kind of meshes because it makes us take a step back and rethink: do we want to just play our greatest hits? Do we want to rethink how we do things? What do we want to do about the rosé? We're going to be planning to change it again because it's evolved so much from its first iterations when it was just a paint by numbers Grenache Syrah, and then adding all the different cépage every year and changing the winemaking to be more sophisticated to deal with trying to underscore what's special about the rosé. And so we actually have a sort of symbolic thing that happened this year because in the big storm that I mentioned that did a lot of damage, we brought down the blue oak, the Chêne Bleu, that was our iconic multi-centenary tree that we had painted with copper sulfite. And so we're thinking about what's the right iteration to do homage to that and have the Chêne Bleu 2.0 literally as well as all these things. So circling back to your question, I'm personally fascinated by how rosé is a case study for how quickly things can change in the wine world when there's a perfect storm. Technology changes a little bit, lifestyles change, the right people show up at the scene at the right time, all of that. When we started, it was such a no-no. When we were working with Zelma Long and Philippe Combi from the start to really showcase how special these soils were and how special the wines could be, we thought, they really didn't want us to make a rosé because they thought, well, serious wineries don't make rosé because it's not serious. And we were like, yeah, but look at our whites, the altitude and the freshness, all that stuff. So we thought, okay, let's think. If we're going to make a rosé, it's got to be something special, something different, something out there that we really enjoy drinking because it has that complexity and it has the ageability. And nobody was using that vocab around rosé when we were starting, right, in 2006. And there were a few niche people who had been making age-worthy rosé forever. We know who they are. We love those guys, whether it's Tondonia or Tempier or whoever. And but we were all kind of specialty producers, right? And then we were lucky that at the same time, Sacha Lichine showed up on the scene with his rosé, and that broke through a lot of glass ceilings because he had the might, the scale, the contacts, everything to make a big splash and to say, okay, guys, you've got to take a second look at rosé. You have to see what it can do if it's made this way or that way. And then kind of we all pulled together in the right direction at the right time, and I think broke through a lot of the taboos around high quality rosé and why it deserved to be taken seriously. And that was the beginning of a very exciting time. But always when things are going well like that, a whole bunch of people pile in who had no business being there in the first place. So you had serious producers who had the opportunity to do good things. And then you had a bunch of people who were just riding the wave to take advantage of a fashion or a fad or growing market share, which there are always so few in the wine world. And so, so that was, I think, what got us to the point we're at now, which I think is a tipping point. Saturation of the market, too much garbage coming out from left, right, and center. 2 days ago, I had a lunch with a master of wine, and I won't tell you what region she was talking about, but she was complaining about sitting through this terrible tasting, which were 100 rosés, supposedly the top ones, from a country that won't be mentioned, that has no business trying to make rosé. They don't have the climate for it. They don't have the terroir. Big mistake, but they want to get on the rosé bandwagon. And she just couldn't wait to get out of there. And she was at the point where it was almost like in that movie Sideways, where, if they make me drink one more rosé, I'm not going in there, right? And so I think we're getting to that place where everybody, from the critics to the trade people to the consumers, everybody knows is having to become more knowledgeable or sophisticated about understanding the subcategories within the rosé world. And it's no longer a binary, I like, I don't like. And with that in mind, I'd say a consumer now and in the future will probably have a much bigger selection of different styles of rosé, where they have some big brands to quaff by the pool because they want something easy that they don't have to think about, but they'll also have some carefully made ones and hopefully more and more organic rosés. I think it's crazy nowadays for anyone who can afford it to drink too much rosé that's not organic, because there is so much stuff that goes into it. If you think of all the commercial brands that are victims of their success, inevitably they're buying grapes left, right, and center. They're dumping them in big vats from all over with different styles and climates. And then they have to standardize it. And God knows what they have to put into that in order to come out with something that's fairly uniform from one year to the next. I think really looking for things where there's been a different kind of care in the vineyard is a very good thing to go forward. So my take is that from now on, you're going to have much more discrimination and differentiation. You're going to have a shakeout where a lot of these bad brands just should stop now. And you're going to have, just like any kind of bubble in any market, real estate, stocks, prime, subprimes, all of that. There's a big shakeout, and people get very tired of things, and then the cream rises to the top. And then you see the people who do know what they're doing and have been careful and thoughtful and deliberate, those guys will have staying power. And I think there was a really good article that I enjoyed from Kristen Beeler in 750 Daily. That really did a nice overview of where she felt the rosé category was going. And I wouldn't be surprised if the top rosés will have some staying power no matter what happens to the other guys.
Yeah, that was a great article. I think the key is tinkering with the goal of improving your wines without it turning into, for lack of a better term, Frankenstein's monster.
Absolutely. Well, you've visited so many wineries yourself in your long career in the wine world, and I'm sure you've noticed on all those winery tours, there are so many ways to skin that cat. Starting with very careful work in the vineyard makes it much easier in the winery, of course, to not have to make all those adjustments. That takes time, that takes effort, that takes a lot of ability to manage risk, because it is so much easier to just spray all that glyphosate over everything or dump everything in a tank and strip out all the yeast and put in a bunch of tartric acid and God knows what. Those are shortcuts that I think one pays for in the end. And we're all fortunate in the wine world, all the people I've seen go by, all the friends who are on today, all the colleagues and wine people, that we're in a position that we get to drink a lot of really good wine on a pretty regular basis. So I hope that rosé will have its little place in the Olympus of serious wines going forward. Where do you think the rosé category is going? And I'd love to hear in the chat. And thank you for saying hello, everybody. Love to see you. Can you maybe throw out your thoughts about where you think rosé is going, should go? What anyone have any thoughts to share? What about you, William? Do you feel that things are getting better?
I think that things. I think that things are getting better, because now that it is an established category, we are now starting to see, the extremes, because there's a commercial viability for both sides. And, it's, the mother of all invention, right? Is exactly that. So if you've got a need for it out there in the marketplace, people will gravitate toward it. So, in terms of the ageability of rosé, in terms of quality of rosé, yes, there will be people that want to drink their dare I say, inexpensive, less complex styles of wines. And that's, you know, irrespective of the style of wine, whether or not it's rosé or they're mono varietal wines. There's always going to be someone that is willing to make, you know, a $5 or $6 bottle of wine that you can just pick up at the grocery store. But now that rosé is at this point, you know, where it is widely accepted, it's, you know, every restaurant, you know, whether or not it's the least expensive to a 3-star Michelin, they're going to have rosé either by the glass or at least a number of selections on their wine list. And you see the, you know, the huge shelves of rosé with, you know, producers and great varieties from every corner of the globe. Quality, to me, is going to be that next step, you know, and we are going to start to see more seminars, more of these, you know, these focuses on, okay, we're going to do a retrospective, you know, because now we've got enough producers, yourself included, where we'd be able to do, you know, a vertical of these rosés. You know, 10 years ago, you didn't have that. So I think that the future is bright for rosé if you're established. For somebody that's trying to get in, you have to be not only unique, but you also have to have quality at the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's good news for everyone. I think people are getting around the fact that you can't just improvise making quality rosé. It starts in the vineyard. You have to rethink what you plant, where you plant it, how you look after it, how you prune it. Then when you bring it in at harvest, you have different harvest dates than you do for your reds. Then you have special equipment right away that you have to have on hand, like a big pneumatic press. Otherwise, you can't even ever aspire to make rosés like this because you can never get any of that beautiful you know, texture and complexity unless you do the cold fermentation with the lees. In our case, we strip out, you know, that 20-25% right away from each one of the varieties and put them each into these barrels, and we do that. That I think is really important to bring out different nuances, because a wine that ferments in barrel is going to have a completely different experience, right? Most people are making all their wines in those rosés in those cold fermentation tanks, which is fine, and it's very controlled and it's very scientific. The minute you put some of your wine into a barrel, it's the ambient temperature around it in the cellar that's going to be bringing out different nuances and flavors in the exact same grapes. Like we see this every year. We put some of those same grapes from the same parcel in a tank, and then we take out that 25% and put it in a barrel. And that same wine is going to be evolving differently and bringing out different nuances. So all of that is so exciting and so interesting. And I'm hoping that as people get to know the category better, we won't have what we've had for so long, which is this by, oh, I love rosé, oh, I can't stand rosé, that binary thing. It's that ship has sailed, right? It's a big category now. There's something for everyone. If you like the little niche producers like us that do everything by hand and are super geeky and like to do things with no chemicals that are age worthy, etc., that's great. And if you like the big brands with all the slick marketing and all the everything stuff because it makes you feel like you're a movie star or God knows what, absolutely be my guest, or like both, right? This is the fun thing about wine. You don't have to be consistent in your tastes every day of the week, every month of the year. You can have a bunch of different wines in that cellar for different occasions. And unless you're like us and you're really not keen on chemicals, you know, all I don't want is the hypocrites, right? I don't want to be sitting across the table from another girlfriend who tells me, you know, oh, I only have free-range chicken and grass-fed beef and, you know, wild line-caught salmon, whatever. But here I am guzzling this big commercial brand of rosé. You know, that's just because I don't know any better. I don't know the difference, and so that's why I'm getting sucked into consuming something that is inconsistent with all the other decisions that I've made in my life, which is totally okay, because it's our job in the wine trade to educate people so that they know what's going on behind the scenes and they make an informed decision and they drink something that fits in with all the other ideologies that they have around how the planet should be looked after or what they should ingest or what they enjoy eating or drinking, right? So if we give them the information, then they're free to navigate that rosé category any way they want, every which way. And I just hope that they'll all end up with a whole bunch of different rosés in their cellar.
Agreed. Couldn't have said it more perfectly myself. Well, with that in mind, I mean, my goodness, we have we've joyously gone a few minutes over time. But thanks for everyone for joining us. I know that we're going to be doing a quick Instagram actually in 2 weeks with Arista, with Mark McWilliams and the team out in Russian River. But with that in mind, though, Nicole, what's going to happen with the Chêne Bleu itself? You know, now that the tree isn't there, have we talked about putting a new tree in its place? Will something grow in that spot? Oh, the eyebrows
I'm
says
very
it all.
open to suggestions. There's actually a little international competition going on around there. I'm lucky that on my team there are people who have been working with us since the beginning, like the amazing Laura Iverson, who, for those of you in the US haven't met her, you must meet our business partner, who's fantastic and has been so helpful in every regard. And she's always full of ideas. So we've been brainstorming, and I have some ideas in the works, but they're not set in stone. And I'd love to have suggestions from anyone. And we have a very, very nice prize for anyone who has a winning idea of what the next Chêne Bleu 2.0 should be. So get in touch with me for sure. And to all our friends who signed on today, it was a real pleasure to see you all. I'd love to get more of your feedback about what you think we are doing right or we could be doing differently for this just general Chêne Bleu 2.0, this new generation coming on, these new projects we have, the wine world changing, the post-COVID era opening up. We love new ideas. We thrive on them. We love that interaction. It's part of our whole philosophy of non mihi, non tibi, sed nobis, which is that not mine, not yours, but ours, which we try to do at Chêne Bleu, of just working with a spirit of collaboration and not competition, working with open-mindedness, with inclusivity, and the things that we think are really important for building that next generation of what fine wine should be about.
Well, you guys are certainly in great hands with the next generation. So thank you again. Now, I know that we could talk for hours, you know, and hopefully we can do it. The next time we do that, we'll be in person with a couple of glasses of wine and some great food in front of us.
I miss you. I miss all of you guys at Wilson Daniels. I miss all our clients and friends in the US. We can't wait to visit. Hoping to make it there this summer if you guys are around. Hope to see you then. And we're hoping that things will open up over here and you guys will be able to come back and visit us, because we're very lonely all the way up here at the top of our mountain without you.
We will make a party of it. Thanks again, my dear.
Santé. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And thanks again, everyone. Stay safe out there. We'll see you soon.